Eric Swedin is a professor of history at Weber State University in Utah. He has written several nonfiction textbooks and academic works, as well as 5 novels, and his books and papers have been cited in over 70 academic works. He won the Sidewise Award for his 2010 alternate history novel, When Angels Wept, a what-if history of the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was a consultant on 2 documentaries about the Cuban Missile Crisis, Clouds Over Cuba, which won an Emmy Award, and What If Armageddon 1962, a documentary which aired on the Military Channel in 2014. Everybody, please give your warmest Zoom welcome to Eric.
Okay, Zoom welcome, huh? That's great. I do have a presentation with some pictures, and I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about a topic that I find very interesting and that I've done a certain amount of scholarship on. Science and technology in Utah is a pretty big issue, so I'm going to mainly talk about it from the perspective of mining in Utah and the computer industry in Utah and rockets in Utah and some of the things that the University of Utah Medical Center has done, and just end with a little talking about what makes STEM work in Utah and elsewhere. So let's bring up, whoops, let's hit the right buttons, and let's come over here and let's talk about Bingham Copper Mine. And the reason we're talking about Bingham Copper Mine is for many years, this was the biggest hole on Earth. And while there are some other mines around the world, copper mines or diamond mines that are actually deeper holes or bigger holes, the Bingham Copper Mine is still the world's biggest excavation. And the reason is because unlike those other mines, the Bingham Copper Mine started as a mountain, and the whole mountain was removed in the process before they made the really big hole. This is a picture showing it while it was still being created and while the town of Bingham actually still exists. The town of Bingham no longer exists. It's been covered up with overfill. The interesting thing about the Bingham Copper Mine, besides its size, is that Bingham became a mining district that had dozens of mines extracting a variety of different ores. And they knew there was a lot of copper there, but the copper was at a very low percentage, not high enough percentage to actually justify underground mining. So what they did is they innovated and said, well, we're just going to rip through everything and we're going to process everything. And by doing this on a massive scale, very much like mass production, we are going to be able to make it a viable operation. And it was a viable operation. It still is a viable operation. And they built railroads to go in and out of it, to remove overfill and to remove ore to be processed. Nowadays, they don't have the railroads anymore. What they do is they have gargantuan trucks. And if you ever have the opportunity to go out there and see these trucks, the wheels themselves are taller than most people. It is a very impressive operation. And this is another picture. This is a picture I really love from Bingham back when it was a town. The first thing that's interesting is on the left-hand side, you see basically tipped over ore cars from the railroad. What happened here is, you can see it just on the left-hand side, you see a railroad, a rail, and then there's not one. And then you can see part way down the slope, you can see a couple of railroad ties. Basically, this is one of the hazards of living in that town, is the railroads sometimes collapsed and trains tumbled down the side. The other thing I like about this is a demonstration of the changing quality of life in Utah. And if you look at these houses here, behind them, they each have an outhouse that is reached via a little bridge they've built. And this is not the outhouse. The offal from the outhouse isn't going into a dirt hole. It's going into the stream. And basically, they've turned the stream that goes down the middle of the canyon into their sewage removal system. This is a picture of Bingham today. Big hole, very impressive. Are there environmental consequences of this? Massive environmental consequences. Are there massive technological consequences? Absolutely. Bingham was a major source of copper for electrifying our country, making the copper wires that electricity ran through for the past, for the first part of the first half of the 20th century. And combining different elements of science and technology, this should be interesting. This is a picture of the Bingham copper mine taken from the International Space Station. And you can see there's a big hole, and there's a lot of rounding to prevent surrounding mountains from falling in. And what you don't necessarily realize is a lot of those mountains further to the right and that are all, that's all overfill that has been deposited over the years, extracted from the hole and dropped off because it wasn't ore bearing, and the ore bearing material has been processed. Moving on to the computer industry, which the computer industry doesn't really lend itself to pictures other than logos. But I did want to talk about some of the impressive things that happened in the computer industry here. You've probably heard the term Silicon Slopes, which is a play on words to Silicon Valley and combines with the idea that we have a ski industry also. Silicon Slopes is a real phenomenon. Utah, Wasatch Front has become a real hotbed, incubation area for different computer companies. The first time that the computer industry started to become important in Utah had to do in the 1960s with the University of Utah. University of Utah had a leading computer science program. They were very heavily involved in the graphics, the founding of the graphics industry. The Evans and Sutherland Company, which was a high-end specialist company, was directly spawned by the University of Utah. And some other people from the University of Utah moved to California, and combined with some other people, they founded Adobe. And Adobe is still an important graphics powerhouse in the computer industry. Another place where the University of Utah was very instrumental is in 1969, the Defense Departments, through their Advanced Projects Research Agency, created ARPANET. And of the first 4 nodes on the ARPANET, one of those was the University of Utah. The other 3 nodes were in California. ARPANET developed new technologies like packet switching and TCP/IP, and what we think of as ARPANET eventually became what we now think of as the internet. And so later on, well, at the same time, in the 50s and 60s, there were lots of computer industries in Utah taking advantage of the highly educated workforce. And you think of companies like National Semiconductor, Sperry Rand, which later became Unisys. And in the 80s, you had some interesting companies developed in Utah County, taking advantage of the computer science programs at BYU. One of those later became Novell, which really pioneered local area networking for computers, and was a very influential company in the 80s and 90s. And another one was WordPerfect. And WordPerfect, at its height in the late 80s, was one of the top 10 PC software companies in the country, and the #1 company when it came to word processing. Those companies have gone, and the products have gone to other places now, been purchased. Some of them still exist in a minor form. And the Silicon Slopes legacy was carried on with the rise of the World Wide Web in the mid 90s, and you go down to Utah County and Salt Lake also, taking advantage of BYU, taking advantage of the University of Utah. We have lots of startups. We have some multi-billion-dollar startups that have been very successful, and the computer industry is a very important industry in Utah now. So let's move on to rockets, something that's near and dear to my heart. So after the success of the Apollo 11 and the Apollo program to go to the moon, the United States decided that they wanted to build a space shuttle. And there was a variety of different ideas bandied about for the space shuttle. And this is an example of some of the proposed space shuttles. And early on, in the early 70s, NASA decided to put out the idea that they would build the shuttle port perhaps somewhere else in the country, not necessarily in Florida. And Utah actually put together a really good proposal to build a shuttle port here in Utah. And it was based on the idea that the shuttle at that time would be a two-part shuttle. One would be the orbiter, and the other one would also be manned, and it would launch the orbiter into orbit, but then it would return and land. And Utah's big argument for basing it in Utah was, let's build the space shuttle port on top of a mountain in Utah. And so if you build it on top of a mountain, that means you're that much closer to space, you have that much less atmosphere, you can carry substantially more payload than if you build it down at sea level like Cape Canaveral in Florida. They put together a really good proposal, and quite frankly, the Utah proposal worked out to be one of the top 4 or 5 proposals in the country. And but it didn't happen because they basically decided to build the shuttle in a more cost-effective way, and they decided to have solid rocket boosters on the side. These are called SRBs, and those had to be dropped and return and land in water, and then they could be reused. You're going like, well, we got the Great Salt Lake. Why didn't they drop in the Great Salt Lake? Because the Great Salt Lake is a really, really shallow lake. And if one of those boosters had landed in the Great Salt Lake, it would have stuck on the bottom and stuck out like a big pencil, and it wouldn't have been successful. But this is part of the proposal that was put together. They proposed 2 locations. One was at Dugway, and the other one was out near Wendover. And what I loved about the proposal is they said, well, you know, you're worried about hitting if you have a failure and you crash. And Utah, everyone lives along the Western Front, and your flight path will only be going across that area for a few seconds. So the chances of hitting the Wasatch Front with a crashed space shuttle is really slim. That was their argument. In the end, Utah did not get the spaceport. They decided to go with Cape Canaveral, which they'd already had built up for the Apollo programs. And they also planned to put it in Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. And that spaceport was built. It was just never used for the space shuttle. And that's what they built. And you're going like, didn't Utah have something to do with this? Yes, we did. Because we had a couple of companies in Utah. One was called Magna, and they had what they called the Bacchus Works, which was located in, not Magna, I'm sorry, Hercules, which was called the Bacchus Works, which was located in Magna. And we also had Thiokol, which built a plant out in Promontory. Basically, you go to Brigham City, turn left, and drive for 30 miles. And both of these had been established to build solid fuel rockets for the military, building shorter range rockets and longer range rockets in the form of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And Thiokol got the contract to build the solid rocket boosters, those two things on the side of the space shuttle. And was very successful. What they do is they build them. They were in 4 different parts. They would put them on railroad cars, and then they would transport them down to Cape Canaveral, where the whole booster would be assembled and married to the shuttle. And for those that know enough about Utah history, you know that there's kind of a negative part of this story. Well, first of all, this is them testing a solid rocket booster. You tie it to the ground and you blast it into the hill. It's a magnificent thing to watch. This is the 1986 Space Shuttle explosion of the Challenger. It exploded because of a defect in one of the solid rocket boosters. And that was a sad story. They redesigned them so they couldn't do that anymore, and the space shuttle program continued. But I see I have a time issue here, so let me move forward and talk about the University of Utah. University of Utah has 2 big claims to fame in the medical field. One is in 1982 when Barney Clark, the retired dentist, received the first successful artificial human heart. He lived for 112 days, and the University of Utah was a center for working on building artificial hearts and building kidney dialysis machines and building other types of replacements for human organs, mechanical replacements. The other thing is this particular person here, whose name is Mario Capici. He is an Italian immigrant. He survived homelessness as a child in World War II Italy. He was actually hospitalized with malnutrition at the end of the war. He was 9 years old when his mother found him. His mother was an American who had been living in Italy, who for political activities had been sent to the concentration camp Dachau. And after she was released there by the Americans, she was able to find her son, brought him to the United States. He went on to earn a doctorate at Harvard. He joined the faculty of the University of Utah in 1973 as a genetic scientist. And in the late 80s, him and 2 colleagues from the University of North Carolina and the University of Cardiff in Wales created transgenic mice, also called knockout mice, which are mice, basically a separate mice species in which you knock out a gene so that these mice can be used in medical experimentation. In 2007, him and his 2 colleagues received the Nobel Prize in Medicine. So as I wrap up, I want to emphasize that the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, success in that comes from having a quality education system at all levels, having a vigorous and active higher education system of colleges and universities. It comes from economic innovation, being supported by venture capitalists and by friendly laws, and it comes from government support in the forms of those laws and the right attitude towards this. But in the end, these are all elements that lead to success in STEM. But STEM is about human beings and our minds being used effectively. And that is my presentation.
Thank you so much, Eric. There's a lot I didn't know there. And I hope audience also learned a little bit too. Let me pull up our next speaker. And our next speaker is actually going to be Vanessa Seals of the Ronald E. McNair Post-Baccalaureate Achievement Program at Westminster College to talk about a little bit of that infrastructure which Eric Swedin just referred to, right? What it takes to get Utah at the forefront of STEM. I'm gonna shut down your screen sharing real quick.
That's good.
Boom.
Because I'm trying to do it now.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric. Vanessa, set to go. Vanessa, your mic's off.
Thank you. Yeah.
There you go.
This happens constantly. Hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa Seals, and I am the director of the McNair Scholars Program at Westminster College. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are. Willie, can you still see now that I'm in full screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry, I've had issues with that in the past couple of days. So thank you all for being here. I'm super excited to be able to talk about the McNair Scholars Program. It's something I'm very proud of and I have deep connections with. And Willie Paloma is actually one of our alum. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about us here. Oh, that's not going to be cute. Okay, so I'm going to talk about myself just a little bit, the McNair program, and then tell you what we do. I'll talk about some of our results, some of our notable alum, and talk about who should apply. So who am I? I'm Vanessa Seals, the director. I'm also an alum of the Westminster McNair Scholars Program. This is a picture of me and my best friend. We graduated from the University of Utah in 2010. I'm born and raised in Utah. And we both went on to PhD programs. I went to Stanford to study English, and she went to UCLA to study higher education. And before this moment, not even before this moment, before I got into McNair, I didn't know what grad school was. I didn't know what PhDs were. I had no idea about any of it. And within 10 years, I was able to actually earn a PhD. And that's very much characteristic of the work that we're doing. So speaking of the Challenger explosion, we're named for Dr. Ronald E. McNair, who was one of the astronauts who died in that explosion. And also, Eric, my great uncle, was an engineer on the program that manufactured the defective parts. And so I grew up hearing all about it. So I've had this strange connection with Dr. McNair for a long time. But we're federally funded through the Department of Education. We're grant funded, and we support students on their path to graduate education. We support students who are US citizens and permanent residents, low income and first gen, and underrepresented. And with the incoming administration, we're very hopeful that we'll be able to support DACA students as well. But Dr. Ronald E. McNair had a PhD in physics, and he was going to retire after this mission to become a professor. And so this program was making its way through Congress at the time, and there was a unanimous agreement to name it for Dr. Ronald E. McNair, who's very interesting, and I would highly recommend that you look him up. So what do? We offer paid research experience, test preparation, application fee waivers, application support, networking, workshops, conference funds. What we're doing is helping undergrads have some experiences and kind of create a profile that will make them really successful and sought after in graduate education. Specifically, we want our students to get PhDs or research master's degrees, but we do have students who have received professional degrees and have done a lot of really interesting things. And so we've had 194 McNair Scholars since 2003. Those blue ones are those who have achieved their PhDs so far. 9 out of 10 of our McNair Scholars are from Utah. 73% of our scholars have an advanced degree or are currently in graduate school. They're in the pipeline. And 24% of our scholars received their PhDs, which is contrasted with about 1.4% of US adults. And that data comes from the Census Bureau, the 1.4%, and we are counting our students who graduated from 2004 to 2010 because we track them for 10 years afterward to give them the chance to get those PhDs. I wanted to highlight a couple of notable alum, all Utah residents. Reese Peck was in our first cohort, and he just received tenure at CUNY Staten Island. He wrote a book on Fox populism, and he's doing fantastic. Sarah Jackson is an alum in, I think, the second cohort, and she's now the Presidential Associate Professor of Communication in the Annenberg School of Communication at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's written 2 books. And then in the spirit of STEM, Benson Stevens, they're all doctor. Dr. Benson Stevens is currently a postdoctoral fellow at the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. He is such an interesting story. He's first gen, low income. He actually traveled around as the cook for a group, I think it's called the Happy People or the Rainbow Family or something along those lines. So he was very much like in a hippie dippy movement, just kind of going to the beat of his own drum. And then he learned that he could go back to school. And so he got degrees in neuroscience, and he's doing amazing things. So I just wanted to highlight, these are some of the students who are actually impacted and some of the impacts they're then able to make when they receive their PhDs. And we're very, very proud of them. So that's our quick little introduction. You're going to hear from one of our amazing scholars in just a moment. This picture on this slide is actually Carl McNair. It's Dr. Ronald E. McNair's brother. We had the opportunity to hear him speak not too long ago, and he's a very inspiring man, and he just says wonderful things about his brother. And if you have any questions or if you want to know more about us, you can contact us in many ways. Go to Westminster College's website, McNair at Westminster College if you want to email, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram. So that is my quick presentation for all of you.
And thank you so much, Vanessa. And McNair Scholars is one of those programs that's, yes, fundamental, especially for making sure that underrepresented students and first-gen students can end up in grad school. Every Latino except for one that I met in Indiana University of Bloomington, where I did my MFA, went through McNair. And I think that just speaks a lot to like what would have happened if that program wasn't there. Like, would have there only been one other Latino I would have encountered in grad school. So thank you so much for doing the work you're doing, Vanessa. And now I have the pleasure of inviting Rosa Mendes to the screen. Rosa is a McNair Scholar and chemistry student at Westminster College. She was born in Mexico and migrated into the US at age of 14. After graduating in May 2021, she hopes to enter an MD/PhD program. Rosa is passionate about biological and chemical pathways. Rosa, take it away.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay. So, like Willie said, my name is Rosa Mendes, and I'm a student at Westminster College. And I will be talking about the research I was able to do this summer. And it is the regulation of chaperone-mediated autophagy by pharmacological activators and inhibitors. And that's a mouthful. It's so before we talk about it, I kind of want to explain it, and then you'll be able to keep up with me. So chaperone-mediated autophagy is an intracellular breakdown system, meaning that happens within your cells. And it's a breakdown system because it breaks things into smaller things. So there are 2 very important parts to this pathway. One is HSC70, which is a chaperone molecule that binds with a protein that has a KFERQ amino acid code. And that just means that it has to have like a very specific amino acid sequence for it to bind with it. And then our second part, it's LAMP2A. So what HSC70 will do is that it'll bind to the protein and kind of walk it through LAMP2A. And LAMP2A, which is a door, basically will recognize HSC17 and our protein, and it will break down into smaller pieces. It's very important to say that this mechanism only works for proteins that our body doesn't want anymore. They are not useful, or they are just redundant. So why is CMA important? Well, CMA is protective of various diseases. Research has shown that that it is protective of hepatitis B, neurological diseases such as Alzheimer, cancer, and there's also a correlation with CMA and our current virus, COVID-19. So while we know how CMA is related to diseases, we really don't know how to monitor it. So we know that CMA has a function with these diseases, but we don't know how much it goes up or how much it goes down. So the question here is, how can we regulate chaperone-mediated autophagy using pharmacological agents? So our hypothesis was that the pharmacological activators or inhibitors that we use to manipulate CMA pathway can serve us as effective tools to study the clearance mechanisms in different diseases conditions. So we chose pharmacological agents because we want them to be accessible to other researchers so they can use it to actually do research on these diseases. We only wanted to find a way to see how much CMA was involved in a cellular pathway. So first, here are the inhibitors we intended to use. We intended to use BER 15508, pitrephine, and oxymetrine. And inhibitors will just lower the levels of HCC70 and LAMP2A. So what the inhibitors will do, they will interact with HCC70 and they will stop the binding of KFRQ. So then we will see lower levels of both HCC70 and LAMP2A. And then we have our activators. For activators, we expected to see an upregulation, so more activity of LAMP2A and HCC70. And our activators will bind to LAMP2A to make it go faster, so our proteins will go faster to the lysosome. So our methods were, we obtained and grew cells. We grew endothelial cells, which are your vein. So around your veins, you have a layer of fat, and it is the layer between the fat and your veins. And then cardiac cells, which are just muscle cells. Then we treated our cells with different concentrations and at different times. So while we intended to use a bunch of pharmacological agents, and we intended to do it at different times, we only had time to do one inhibitor and one activator, and that was because of the pandemic. The times in the lab were very restricted. So these are the concentrations we used for BER, and they are based on previous research on purified HCC17. So what this research that has been done before was only done on purified HCC70. So it wasn't researched in a cellular level. And then with human ENG, these concentrations were based on our research that was done on rat liver cells. So our methods. So first, we grew our cells with our inhibitors or activators. So in each well, we had a different concentration of our inhibitor or our activator. Then we collected the cell pellets, which is the cell. And then we sonificated the cells so that we destroyed the whole cell and we only had the proteins. Then we ran a Bradford assay. And with that Bradford assay, we determined which of our samples had the lower concentrations. And then we diluted all the concentrations to have the same concentration as our lowest. And that's just so we reduce error. And then we run a Western blot. So what is a Western blot? It is an analytical technique that targets a specific protein. So we first run a gel. We then transfer the gel to and nitrocellulose membrane. Then we use a different block depending on the protein we wanted to see. So if we wanted to see HSC17, we use a blocker called BCA, and then we added non-fat milk. Then, if we wanted to see LAMP2A, we wash the membrane with sea block, which is basically just seawater. And then we incubate it with a primary and secondary antibody, and that will just make so that the protein is more evident in the membrane. And then we image the membrane. So these are our preliminary results. We didn't have time to actually get the actual results. This is just the data that came after the experiments. As you can see here, the thickness and the brightness of each line, it's different. A thicker line, a more clearer line, means that it has a lower concentration. And a more like thick line and more brighter line like this one just means that there's a higher concentration of the protein, which was LAMP2A or HSC70. So what we got from this was that human G, which was our activator, was very efficient at increasing the levels of LAMP2A at 5 micromolar. And we also got the same result for our activator at 5 micromolar for HSC70 levels, which means that our activator worked. In the case of Burr, we can see that about 10 micromolar, there was an apparent reduction of the levels of LAMP2A. And that's what we wanted since it was our inhibitor. From our lines, we can see that it kind of matches. At about 5 micromolars, there's a thicker line here. There's also a thicker line here. And then for humanine, you have a thicker line here for HSC70. This one, as you can see, it's kind of blurry, so we weren't able to actually measure what it had. So our discussions, while results are favorable, we still need to normalize our data to make any true conclusions. As you can see, there's like kind of a curvature in the data here, which just means that at the time of loading, I might have messed up or might shaken my hand a little too much. And the data might come up as if nothing was there if we normalize the data. So there's still work that we need to do there. We also need to analyze the media to quantify if cells are being killed. As you can see here, at 0 micromolar and 20 micromolar, the levels of LAMP2A for BER, which is our inhibitor, so it's slowing down the CMA pathway. The levels are kind of the same and they are kind of high. So what we think is happening is that we're killing too many cells, and these levels are just from the cells that survive. So we have to think if it's worth to kill ourselves in order to monitor CMA, or if it's not worth doing it at all. And we will also want to explore other inhibitors and activators, as we didn't have enough time to explore all of them. And these are my acknowledgements for my research. First, the McNair program for all their support, and the University of Utah for allowing me to do the research there. Raj, who was my mentor, John, Simons, and Sian Budina, who allowed me to work in the lab, and all the other lab members who shared their data with me. And then there's a little bit about me. So I was born in Mexico, and I was pretty much raised there. At the age of 14, my parents decided that we needed to move to the US. I was fortunate enough to move here with a visa. Well, I didn't struggle with immigration issues and things like other students. who aren't documented suffer from, I did have to learn a new language and I had to adapt to a new culture. In 2015, I was fortunate enough to graduate from high school. And my parents, my mom is a lawyer in Mexico and my dad is an engineer. They both graduated high school in Mexico, so college was always something that they wanted me to do. But honestly, I didn't find the motivation to make me go to college until my daughter was born. I had my daughter when I was 19, and I didn't want to be a statistic or something like that. And I also want her to have everything in the world, and I want her to dream high and to achieve those dreams. So I went back to high school because my dream has always been to be a doctor. And who was I to ask my daughter to fulfill her dreams if I didn't fulfill mine? So I went to Westminster College where I fall in love with chemistry. I feel like if you can understand chemistry, you can understand everything you want. While in college, I was presented with the opportunity to apply to McNair. I was hesitant at first as I didn't know what I was going to sign up for, but it truly changed my life. I learned so much about graduate school, not medical school, but a PhD. I learned that I could be a doctor, and not a doctor of persons, but also a doctor that doctor of chemistry or doctor in biology or doctor in something. And while I still want to be a doctor, I also fell in love with research. And I feel like with McNair, even medical school is even more possible as they give you financial aid options and things like that. So what does it mean for me to be a Latina in science? I am very privileged to go to a school where most of the faculty is women. So I learned very quick that even though the world portrays science as a work of men, it is actually run by women, and wonderful women, strong women. So I want to be part of that. I want to be part of those strong women that open doors to the next generation. Also, being a Latina, I noticed that there's most of the research is done for white people. And there's a lot of things that we don't research for Latinos. And me being in a position that can do research, I feel like I can open more doors for others. And I can also help break that wall that we have surrounded around us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosa, for sharing your story and sharing your mind-blowing research. I am so glad that there are scientists in the world because I would be so lost in that research. So thank you so much. Up next, we have Brenda Anderson. JIPE's founder, Brenda, is one of the less than 5% of female Utah CEOs. She lives her life unafraid to uncover and execute ideas that change the way we think, while bringing creative ease to the way we live our lives in a world centered around technology. As a strong, ambitious single mom of 2 teenage boys, she saw a need for an app that made searching for an entry-level job easy and familiar, especially for the Gen Z population. Over the course of the year, after surviving brain surgery, Brenda worked towards her goal of building JIPE during every spare hour. Today, she is proudly showcasing JIPE to both job seekers and businesses. The reviews are in. JIPE is needed and relevant, and it is creating a stir in industry. Brenda, it's such a joy to have you here with us this evening. Take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and to spend the evening with you guys. I just wanted to thank the Utah Department of Heritage and Arts and the sponsors and Governor Cox and his desire to celebrate Utah with this Thrive 125 initiative and program. It's really fun and exciting to be a part of. So thank you for inviting me to participate and share my story and how I have crossed my own frontier and Fronteras in STEM. And thanks to the other speakers who have commented tonight. It was very insightful and great to hear from you. I am going to share a little presentation as well. I'd like to start by talking just for a moment about how amazing Utah is for tech startups. I mean, it's great for a lot of things, but Utah is like the startup capital, you know, next to San Francisco. Like, this is the place to be. And what makes Utah so great is we have like over 6,500 tech companies and startups in the state, which is an incredible amount of business in technology. We have access to software developers and computer science, and we have access to networking and just a huge network of people who are involved. And we have access to fundraising as well, which is huge for startups, is being able to find VC capital or private equity money or even an angel investor. There's lots of ways to get capital here in Utah and lots of access to get it if you go after it. So it's a great place to be. I'm excited that I live here and that I can tap into this awesome like economy of tech in Utah. It's really helped me a lot. I'd like to start just telling you a little bit about what JIPE is, because you may or may not have heard of it. If you're coming to this event, you probably have at least heard of it. But JIPE is a brand new job search app that I have developed, and it is mobile only. I wanted to build a job search tool that was really different from anything else that is out there in the market today. I wanted it to be something my kids would use. I wanted it to be interactive and interesting and different and a little more relevant to how we search for things today, which is like right here on our mobile device. I mean, we're glued to our phones 90% of the day. So creating a job search app that could help connect job seekers to jobs in a localized area. I'm going to share a little video that we had made that might give you a little bit of insight as to what JIPE is. So we'll just play this.
We know looking for a job can be painful. That's why we built JIPE. Our mobile app will make finding your next hourly job so easy, it's bananas. JIPE walks you through creating your work profile, selecting your work preferences, and matching you to jobs. Swipe right on your favorites, left on all the others. You can research a company, share jobs with friends, in-app message, and apply. All right from your phone, wherever you are. It's simple. Download JIPE. Your next job is a swipe away. We know looking for a job can be painful.
Sorry, guys.
That's why we built
it. My bad. So that just shows you a little bit about what JIPE is and why I built it. And as you can see, I'm just going to try and go back a few slides. JIPE is an easy way. Like, already the software, we're getting great reviews. People love how simple it is and how easy it is to find jobs. And even though we're brand new and we're still growing a database of users and of businesses who are posting on our site, the reviews are really great, and people like just the simplicity of what I designed and what I'm like putting out there to the world. So we really legit are brand new. So JIPE just launched to the app stores 15 days ago. On Monday, February 15th was our launch day. And it was very exciting and a lot of work to get to that day. And so it is out there in the world, and this is just the beginning. We have an exciting future ahead. Oh my goodness.
We know looking for a job can be painful.
Sorry, guys. I'm trying to like figure out how to get. past this. There we go. Sorry about that. I thought that it would be interesting to talk about my story, because my story is a little bit different. I'm not your average CEO, as the bio that Willie read. There's less than 5% of female CEOs in Utah, and it's a path that I had to come to. And I am a single mom of teens, and I feel like this is relevant, and I bring it up because it's part of my story and what I've had to do, and what I've had to go through to get to where I am today. My kids inspire me. Like I said, I really wanted to build something for them. I wanted to build a tool that they would use and that they would think is cool, that their friends would think was cool. That really gave me a lot of drive. And also just the single part, like being a single mom, like I've had to learn how to navigate independence and figuring out how I'm going to take care of my kids' lives and my life, and take charge. And that really drove me to like think of ways that I can be successful and what I can do. The other thing about being single is, this might sound a little crazy, but like I've been exposed to dating apps. So as I'm out there trying to make connections, to meet people, I've experienced what it's like to be on a dating app. And that did inspire the swiping function for jobs. I mean, if you've been on a dating app, you get it. And that was an inspiration to me, and it really helped the JIPE idea come to life. The other thing that I personally have been through is I am a brain tumor survivor. In the summer of 2018, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, acoustic neuroma. And it was the size of a golf ball, like lodged in my inner ear, like way into my inner ear on the left side, and pushing my brain stem like all the way over to the right. And as you can imagine, being diagnosed with a brain tumor is quite a shock and quite a blow. It was something that literally changed my life forever. But I feel like it's relevant to my story, and what I walked away with as I went through that challenge and that struggle is this definite knowledge that I can do amazingly hard things. And no matter what it is, like if it's a brain tumor, I'm gonna tackle that the best I can. And the things that I learned about myself and how I push through challenges really gave me the fortitude to launch a company. I knew that I could do this. And if I could give it my all, just like I did when I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, then I could be successful. And whether the business succeeds or not, it's still considered a success to me. The other interesting thing about me, which I think is really interesting, especially with the topic of STEM, is I do not have a STEM background. I have an art degree from Weber State University. I graduated in 2001 with a Bachelor's of Arts in art. I had an emphasis in graphic design. So professionally, that is my background. I grew my skill set on creativity. I learned how to tell stories visually and through writing as well. I learned how to communicate complex ideas and processes using graphics and like phrases, words, and trying to get people to consume knowledge that if you like present it in a paragraph form, people don't read, or it's not interesting, or they can't understand it. So taking those really complex ideas and providing it in a way that they can consume really quickly was important. So graphic design, some technical writing, I did some business development and marketing. That is my world that I come from. Yet here I am, I built a tech company and I started this from the ground up. And a lot of people want to know, like, how did I do this? So how did I find success in tech with a humanities background? And I've come up with 4 different things that I feel like I possess that allowed me to get to where I am today. The first thing is creativity, and I've mentioned that, but I think it's key. One thing that I know about myself is I am an idea machine. I'm constantly thinking of ideas, and some of them are not great. Most of them are not great, but I'm always thinking of ideas on how to do something or how to solve a problem or how to organize this or that. And it's always spinning. And I think creativity is a really interesting skill that a lot of people with humanities background have. We possess creativity, which is nice to come to the table and with a different viewpoint than other people. So not having a tech background actually allowed me to think about problems in a different way and to create a creative solution for a real problem. Now, when you build a company and a tech company, what's going to make it really successful is that it has to solve a problem that really exists. So ideas that solve real problems. And that's what I did with Jipe is I had this combination of being single and being on dating apps and experiencing just like the interactiveness of what those are like. And I also had my professional background with marketing, and I did some talent marketing where I got really interested in the industry, in the job search industry. And I was very much involved in what the challenges were that job seekers were having and businesses were having. And the universal truth about looking for a job is that it sucks. Like, nobody likes looking for a job. Like, it's the worst. So what could I do that would make finding a job a little bit better and a little less painful? And what can I do to help businesses make connections with those people looking for jobs? And that's when Jipe was born, is what if we could swipe on jobs? Like, you can swipe on people in a dating app. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's it. And I really just took that idea and grew it and developed it. And I knew it was a good idea. And it solved a real problem. And that's why it kept sticking. I actually had the idea for Jipe before I was diagnosed with my brain tumor. And because of that health crisis that I had to take care of, Jipe got shelved. I had to put it on the back burner and take care of myself. And then about a year after my diagnosis and going through my brain surgery and my recovery, I decided to pick it back up, and it was still a good idea after that time lapse had happened. And so, like, those ideas that stick are arguably some of the best ones. And Jipe, for me, I would say, is the best idea I've ever had. Naturally, what comes next is passion, because I just believed so much in my idea, and not only believed in it, but I researched it and I understood the industry and I worked it out. I became extremely passionate about it. And I feel like when you're going to build a company, passion has to exist, and it has to be tangible and borderline obsessive. And ask any of my friends who talk to me about Jipe, or even people I don't know, when it comes up, they can feel the passion that I have for it and that energy that I get when I talk about what I'm doing and what I've built. And having that palpable energy is really important, because it's what translates your idea to other people and they get excited about it. So when I talk about Jipe, it's not uncommon for the other person to get really excited about it too. And it's how I was able to land my first investment deal, is because the investor that I was pitching to, he felt it. He caught on and he loved it and decided to invest in my company. I even asked him if it was okay that I was a little obsessive about my business. And he told me that I better be obsessive about it. So that just showed me that, okay, my obsessiveness is actually a good thing. The next thing that I think is really important is that I build a team that has the skills that I don't have. So just because I don't have a tech background doesn't mean I can't build a tech product. It means that I have to find the people and build a team that knows all the things that I don't know. And so I surround myself with people who bring skills to the table that I don't have. And I used my network from the very beginning. I just started with my network, which arguably is not that big, but I thought, well, who do I know that might know someone who knows this? And I asked that, and I asked lots of questions, probably to the point of annoyance to a lot of people, but lots of questions, lots of networking, and really pursued those people who could answer the things that I didn't know and build the things that I couldn't build, including my developers and the marketing people that I partner with and my investor. And then last but not least, my family, who is my JIPE team, my kids and my parents and my siblings and my best friends, who are all champions of me and what I built. The last thing that I possess that I think is critical when creating a new product and bringing something about is grit. I have to get after it every day. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about women, especially being a woman entrepreneur. And it's really challenging. These are generalized statements, but it's pretty, like, they're true, is as women, we have this weird psychology about success and money. We oftentimes aren't risk takers when it comes to like professions and building things, and we play it safe. And we have this imposter syndrome, some people call it, where we feel like, who am I to build a tech company? And believe me, I mentally went through that process, like, who am I? And I had to come to a point where I could say, yeah, like, why not me? Why can't I do this? There's no reason that my idea isn't good enough that people will like it, and people and businesses will pay money for it, and I can build a legitimate business off of my ideas. And I had some defining moments where I really, I gave myself permission to do it and to take the risk and to be successful and possibly not, and possibly fail as well. Like, we take that risk. And I just knew that if I did JIPE, I would have to be all in, because if JIPE worked, it was going to be big. It was an all-in commitment. And it took me a few months to where I really wanted to do JIPE, to where I actually started moving on it. But as soon as I was all in, I was all in. And I did spend every spare moment building it and working towards creating what I've done and being able to launch an app on the App Store, which is the most incredible feeling. Some of the things that I had to do is, the first thing, I named myself the CEO, which is really weird when it's a company of one. Like, it's my own company, I'm the only person, but I'm the CEO. And I had to, I felt really kind of goofy about it, but I get it. Like, I get why people do that. You have to, I am the CEO of my company. I built a business plan. I hired an attorney. I incorporated the business. I found a software development group that I wanted to work with, who I felt could build the product of my dreams. And I fundraised, and that was arguably the most difficult part. Only 2.9% of VC money goes to women-owned businesses. 2.9. That is insanely sad. And I didn't raise VC level money, but I did find an angel investor that invested a significant amount of money to make my dreams a reality. And I did that with no revenue. I hadn't made $1. And that's unheard of, because everyone that I pitched to originally was like, we love your idea, but you're too early. Build it and come back. Like, I heard that story countless times, and I feel very blessed that I found an investor who would give me a shot, believed, caught onto that passion that I had, and saw my grit and my determination. He loved the idea. It was well fleshed out. I mean, my business plan was solid, and I'd done my research, and I had a plan, and all the right things were in it. And he took a chance on my idea and on me. And that's something that I am proud of, and that I should be proud of. We should all be proud of those accomplishments that we make and those hurdles that we end up crossing, because getting your first round of fundraising is the hardest thing to do. Getting your first yes is the hardest step. So I believe that all these things, like that the personal things about me, being a single mom and having been through hard things like brain tumors and having a humanities background, and then to the traits that I possess, like creativity and passion and grit, like those are the things that made me successful to get to where I am. And that is how I feel like that's my version of how I crossed my frontier and Fronteras in STEM without having any STEM background whatsoever. And we can all do it. We all have the ability to build our dreams and make them a reality when we harness the skills that we possess, even though they might not be what everyone thinks they ought to be. And that's my version. And I'm really glad that I got to present to you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And congratulations on the launch. That is such a huge step. There's so many huge steps that you've had in your journey, but like that launch, that I can't imagine that feeling. I'm gonna invite all the panelists to come back. So Eric Swedin, Vanessa Seals, and Rosa, if you can turn on your cameras, and then we'll go through a little Q&A. We already have some questions in the chat that I'll probably start with. So the first one is, as a fellow STEM girl, this is from Amy Wild, I so appreciate the females that presented tonight. Question for Brenda, what was your biggest technical roadblock in building that?
Ooh, I think for me, the hardest thing is reining in my desire to have it all. So when you first launch a new app, it should be, they call it your MVP, your minimal viable product. What's the least amount you can do that's going to make an impact, and then you build from there. Because my ideas are so big and very fleshed out, I wanted my app to have everything, which would make my MVP more than an MVP, which is kind of dangerous territory. So reining that in, and my developers had to calm me down a few times and say, Brenda, you're adding cost, you're adding time, like, let's chill out. This is an MVP. So I think that for me was the biggest technical challenge that I had to cross. And luckily I had a team who could honestly tell me to cool off.
That's so important. I feel like, especially with creative types, that's sometimes a problem. You got like 1,000 ideas that you're like trying to fit in, and sometimes it's like, no, got to center, do one of them. Thank you so much, Brenda. This next question is for Eric. Did the O-ring defect hurt Utah's technology and space reputation? If so, how long did it take to recoup?
So, no, I don't think it did damage the reputation. Oddly enough, about 10 years after that happened, I worked at Thiokol in the computer field. And one of the things that was really interesting is there were friends I had that had been there, and they said the 18 months after Challenger was hell because they were redesigning everything. Everyone felt guilty, even though it was not the fault of the engineers. This was a known problem. What happened is NASA and Thiokol management made a very bad decision. And one of the things that was interesting is whenever there was a shuttle launch, NASA would broadcast it over NASA TV. And so you could go into the cafeterias at Thiokol and watch the shuttle take off. And it was fascinating to go in there, and everyone would watch stone cold silent. The launch happens. They would wait 2 minutes into the launch until solid booster separation happened, and the Thiokol products were now not part of the shuttle anymore, and then everyone would cheer. It shows the trauma that they had gone through, and Thiokol has continued to be a successful company. It's owned by yet another company, but no, I don't think it damaged the reputation. Many people knew the name Thiokol, and that was the only thing they associated with it. But another thing I didn't mention that Thiokol made, in the 70s, Thiokol made a major breakthrough, and that is they built viable airbags, an idea that had been around for 30 years. And the airbags that you have in your car that saves so many lives is actually a rocket going off in your face. It's rocket technology that has to expand in a fraction of a second from nothing to full expansion so it can actually absorb a person, the blow of a person, within that fraction of a second. And those have been very successful. So Thiokol has a lot of things to be proud of. And Thiokol employees have a lot of things to be proud of.
Yeah, what I get most excited about in Swedin's presentation is all the little nooks and crannies where it's like, oh, I didn't know Utah was involved in that. Like all these little small pieces here and there. I want to invite people to drop more questions into the Q&A, but for now I have a question for Rosa. And Rosa, you said you were looking at PhD programs and research, you were looking at med schools. Are you currently in like waiting for like acceptances or what? Or like what stage are you at? And if you're not waiting for stuff, what schools do you have your eye on?
So I did try to apply for these upcoming like next year, but I think I'm gonna wait because I really want to go to med school. I actually took the MCAT in January, and we'll try to apply to an MCAT, like an MD PhD program this fall. And then whatever that comes, then I'll decide if I want to do a PhD or an MD. Definitely need the University of Utah is one in my options because it's close to home. But I would like to go to California, like Silicon Valley, or whatever, and also New York.
Those are all excellent choices, and good luck these upcoming, like, especially I feel like that application season for graduate school and then that first year of graduate school are some of the like sometimes rockiest, most emotional parts, but they also come with a lot of joy, right? Like that joy of getting the acceptance that's fully funded, which I'm sure you're going to receive down the road. So good luck on that. It looks like we had another question come in, which is for Vanessa. How do you inspire other females to seek higher education?
That's a hard question because I think people come to me already wanting to pursue more education. They just don't know how. And so I call myself a cheerleader. Before the pandemic, students would come into my office and just kind of like cry about how hard things were. And I was like, this space is great for you. You can cry here. And then if you want to talk, you can. And if you don't, you can just walk out. I try to lead with empathy. And I also try to be really honest about my own experiences because my path to the PhD was not easy. And there are a lot of parts of it that I made some big mistakes that that made my life a little harder. And there are some that I ran into people and personalities that made my life a little harder. And so I think also just being honest, like if you want to do this, you should go for it. It's going to be very hard. And there's going to be a lot of times where you feel like you're not good enough. And I need you to hear my voice in your head saying, you are good enough. This is a hard experience. And so I think that's what I mainly try to do is just, I know my students are great. We picked them for the program because they're great. They just need to be reminded of that.
Yeah, and I want to second that. I definitely spent time in the McNair Scholar's office asking tons of questions, maybe crying, asking like, was this a racist encounter with my professor? And then being like, yeah, like all those challenges that happen when you're in higher ed, when you're trying to cross these different frontiers in Fronteras. This next question, if we don't get any more questions, I'll go ahead and let this be the last question. But there's so many different hurdles that each of you has had to overcome in order to get to your career position. Being a professor of science and technology that like just being a professor in academia today is extremely challenging. So if you had any advice for folks who, you know, are trying to figure out how to juggle more, what would it be? How have you managed to, you know, be a single mother, be a mother, and like pursue these like very ambitious things? How did you survive your PhD program? Because like the scariest thing about grad school, I think, is the toxic personalities you sometimes bump into, where it's like, it's already difficult on like a challenging level. And then you throw somebody who's like trying to destroy you. And like, that's just the final wrench that can sometimes make things really challenging. Yeah. So in the spirit of trying to support and uplift one another, what, like, if you had a piece of advice for people trying to overcome the challenges they're facing to, you know, pursue their dreams, what would it be?
I'll start. Is that okay? I feel like, I think being honest with yourself in what your skill sets are and what they aren't. So if you can recognize in yourself what you're really good at and then where you're not, and then that's where you can maybe find a team or find a mentor or someone who can help you with those areas. I think that's really important. I don't think it means just because you don't have a skill doesn't mean you can't try to go after something. It just means like I found a workaround using my skills. So even though I didn't know how to program a line of code, it doesn't mean that I can't build a cool tech thing, because it was the idea. I knew that I had that skill set. So that was my workaround. And I think that we can all find that and find help through each other.
Yeah, I feel like the whole last part of your presentation, Brenda, was like answering this question where it's like, get a team, get a mentor. Oh my gosh, the friends I have who don't have mentors, who are trying to like make big changes in their field. It's like, no, you got to get a team of mentors, because it's impossible to see everything just from like one person's vantage point. So thank you for emphasizing that again, Brenda. Eric, Vanessa, Rosa, any gems to drop?
If I might, getting a PhD puts you in a pretty unique and small group of people. And getting a PhD opened many doors that I didn't even know were closed, or didn't even know those opportunities would be available. There are an enormous amount of opportunities that having a PhD in your background really helps. And so it's worth it, though the process is designed to be challenging. And I recognize that. The week I started graduate school is the week my first child was born. And when I was done with graduate school, I had a really major incentive, because it's really hard to go to graduate school with children. But I had some family support. I had my wife to support. I didn't piddle around. I mean, I went through as fast as I could, because I recognized that if I didn't, this was not an opportunity that it was going to be easy for me to replicate. And weirdly enough, I had a very unusual background. My bachelor's degree is in computer science, and I worked in the computer field. And I went to graduate school and got a doctorate in the history of science and technology. And then I went back and worked in the computer field because, well, first of all, it paid a lot better. And then I had, in 2001 was the dot-com crash. Well, actually, right at the end of 2000 was dot-com crash. 2001, I became unemployed. And I was very fortunate. I would never have even been looking for jobs at a university. And I wound up going back to my, where I got my undergrad at Weber State University. And I went back in the computer science field. I took an enormous pay cut. Though, as my wife pointed out, you're earning zero. This is an enormous pay raise. And I worked in the computer fields for another 10 years. And then through a very unusual set of circumstances, I transferred into the history department. And I still do some technology stuff. I still do some computer stuff, but I am living the dream that I have, which is doing work, doing research, teaching classes about topics that interest me, and I feel like I'm making a contribution. And that is extraordinarily rewarding.
Thank you so much, Eric. I love that like strange crossover of like arts and then tech and then like computer science and then history that we're kind of getting in this panel. For me, it shows that like, you know, the path isn't always very cookie cutter. Like oftentimes there's a lot of different ways that people kind of arrive to where they're at. And then the one comment I did want to throw in, thinking about what you were saying about having a family and being in graduate school, I did know people who had families and were in graduate school and were successful, but yeah, like Eric said, they just did it. Like they had to like be very focused, and it, like they were not the grad students going to the bar every like evening, right? So there's definitely that culture in some grad schools where it's like, yeah, if you're the one with the family, you're not doing that. You gotta like stay on mission. Vanessa or Rosa, anything y'all wanted to add?
I can go. So for me, it would be like, I mean, of course, I don't have a PhD or anything. I'm about to graduate college, but I will definitely say to look for those resources that will help you move along the path. Like, I know like it's hard to make relationships with professors or things like that, but definitely talk to them. They are there to help you. And I had found amazing mentors during my college career. And I have found amazing people like Vanessa who had guided me through college and through what I want to do later on. Nah, I think that's it. And if you want to do something, do it. Don't wait until it's late, because regardless of what you do in 2 years, you'll be 2 years older, either with a degree or not degree. So just do it.
Thank you so much, Rosa, and absolutely feel you on the finding those resources. I feel like for a lot of students, especially students of color, first generation, low income students, you kind of go into college not knowing that like you're supposed to take advantage of all these different resources. I remember it was my first year of college and I was like, why is everybody trying to be friends with me? I already have friends. Like, what's this like weird networking thing that people are doing? And like, you know, feeling like intimidated by the presence of professors, which especially at Westminster College, it's like, no, drop by to office hours, build those relationships. That's how you get those letters of recommend. That's how you get those opportunities. And I've gotten to be where I am right now because a lot of people were looking out for me and were being like, hey, tapping me on the shoulder, like, hey, apply for this, hey, do that. So that's huge. Thank you for emphasizing that, Rosa. Vanessa, do you want to end our evening?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to be the last one, but so hopefully this is inspiring for everybody. I just could not agree more with finding a team, finding your people. I thought that I knew exactly what I wanted to do because as like a type A overachiever, I was like, yeah, no, I know exactly what I'm doing. And through a series of conversations and relationships with professors and staff and mentors, I ended up doing things that I didn't even like Dr. Swedin says, I didn't even know it was possible. And I found myself in spaces that like I would look around and say, I don't even know how I got here. But it's because I was curious about people. And so I would see people who I was like, oh, your life seems interesting. What you do seems interesting. And I talked to them and they were like, oh, if you're interested in what I do, like, let me, connect you to networks, let me do all of these things. So I think just talking to people, being interested and curious about them is actually a very, a useful skill that I didn't realize was a skill. And when I think about my path, I mean, like the PhD was harrowing. If you ever want to get a drink and talk about how hard grad school was, like give me a call because it's one of my favorite things to do. And I think once I realized that the PhD was a means to an end and not the end itself, it was much easier to handle. And I felt that way with undergrad. Like once, I think, Willie, you're kind of saying that once you realize that it's not just a piece of paper you get at the end, but everything that's happening to get you there, and then all of the stuff that's going to happen after, it takes a lot of pressure off of kind of some of the harder, more toxic aspects. My final piece of advice is like I said, thought I knew who I was and what I wanted to do. But when I was forced to zoom out and look at like what story I was actually writing, it was very different from the story I was writing in my mind. So I was like, I'm going to be a professor. I'm going to do all these things. Like I love teaching. And when I looked at my experiences, I was taking every opportunity to mentor students directly through cultural centers, give them advice about grad school, like doing all of those things. And so when it came time to find a job, I was like, oh, I don't think I want to be a professor. I think I want to talk to students about grad school. So if you have ever the opportunity to kind of zoom out and get a perspective on what you're actually doing every day, sometimes that doesn't match what you're doing in your head. And once those two stories come together, it becomes a lot simpler.
I love that final piece about like where your passions are actually driving you. Because sometimes we do get our eyes fixed on a goal and like, but like, you know, your passions are going to do what they want. Like sometimes you, like, I'm a writer, like I can't help it. If like, you know, if it doesn't make me any money, I'm going to still end up writing. It's just like the where my energies are going. So I better figure out how to do it well. Thank all of you for this wonderful evening. There is so many gems throughout, and thank you for sharing your stories and for how y'all fit together in a part of Utah's story.